Who is that? Mom, his name is Arthur, and we got married 2 weeks ago.
The photograph showed my 24-year-old daughter standing beside a man old enough to be her father. His hair was silver. His face was lined. One hand rested gently against her back. Before I could even ask who he was, my phone rang. "Mom," Chloe said, in a voice that sounded practiced, "his name is Arthur, and we were married 2 weeks ago." That was the moment I believed I had lost my daughter. I had no idea the marriage I feared would expose a secret from my own past, send us into a courtroom, and reveal which people truly loved Arthur, and which people had only been waiting for him to die. My name is Linda Parker. I was 51 years old then, and I lived in a modest house outside Columbus, Ohio. I had raised Chloe alone since she was 7. Her father left with a promise to call, then slowly turned into a birthday card, then a late child support payment, then nothing at all. From that point on, it was Chloe and me. I handled medical billing during the day and waited tables 3 nights a week. I learned how to stretch soup and smile through exhaustion so Chloe would never feel like a burden. When she was accepted into an accelerated nursing program in Boston, she cried with joy. Then I saw the tuition estimate. I sold my old Honda, took the bus to work, and accepted every extra shift my body could survive. I told Chloe the money came from savings. Some nights, I slept only 4 hours. Before I go any further, tell me where you are listening from. What city, state, or country has this story reached? Please leave it in the comments below, because I would truly love to know how far this story travels. During Chloe's first months in Boston, she called every night. She told me about anatomy exams, crowded trains, bad cafeteria coffee, in the tiny room she rented with a window facing a brick wall. Sometimes she cried because she missed home. Sometimes she cried because she was afraid she was not smart enough. I always told her the same thing. You do not have to be fearless. You only have to keep going. For a while, we remained as close as ever. Then, around the 5th month, something changed. Our hour-long calls became 15 minutes. Then 10, then 3. Chloe began answering questions with one word. She stopped complaining about the rain. She stopped telling me which professor made her nervous. When I asked about her clinical rotations, she said everything was fine. Fine was not a word Chloe normally used with me. Fine meant there was a locked door in the conversation. One Thursday night, I heard a man's voice in the background. It was low and calm. He said something I could not make out. Chloe immediately moved somewhere quieter. "Who was that?" I asked. "A patient's television." It sounded like a man in the room. "Mom, I have an early shift. Are you dating someone?" She laughed, but the laugh came too fast. "I barely have time to sleep." That was not my question. "I have to go." The line went dead. I stared at the phone, telling myself not to become the kind of mother who confused concern with control. But over the next several weeks, Chloe pulled even farther away. She stopped video calling. She sent photographs of textbooks instead of herself. When I asked to see her apartment, she said it was messy. When I asked to meet her classmates through the screen, she claimed everyone was studying. Then she said she was coming home for a visit. The news should have made me happy. Instead, something in her voice frightened me. She sounded like someone who had rehearsed bad news. I asked her to send me one recent photograph before she flew home. At first, she ignored the message. The next morning, I asked again. By evening, the photograph arrived. Chloe stood near a wide window overlooking a winter garden. She wore a plain blue dress and the small silver necklace I had given her at graduation. Beside her stood an older man. He was tall but thin, with silver hair and a face marked by illness and age. He wore a dark suit that hung loosely from his shoulders. His left hand held a cane. His right hand rested against Chloe's back. There were no balloons, no classmates, and no hospital uniforms. There was a gold band on Chloe's left hand. I looked at the photograph until my eyes began to burn. Then the phone rang. "Mom," she said. "Who is he?" There was a pause. "His name is Arthur Whitmore. Why are you wearing a wedding ring?" Another pause. "Because we got married." The room seemed to tilt. "What did you say?" "We were married 2 weeks ago." I gripped the kitchen counter. "How old is he?" 67. Chloe was 24. I thought of every warning I had ever given her about powerful men, lonely men, charming men, men who offered security in exchange for control. "Is he rich?" I asked. Her silence felt like an answer. "Chloe, is he rich?" "He has money." My fear turned into anger because anger felt easier to survive. So that is what this is. No, you disappeared for months, married a man 40, 3 years older than you, and now you are telling me from another state like you changed apartments. I knew how you would react. You knew because this is not normal. The moment the words left my mouth, I saw how cruel they were, but fear had already taken control of me. Chloe's voice became quiet. I am coming home next week. I will explain then. Did he pressure you? No. Did he pay your tuition? No. Did he promise you something? Wes, she said. My chest tightened. What? That I would be allowed to tell you the truth when it was safe. Then she ended the call. I did not sleep that night. I did not sleep much for the next 4 nights either. I searched Arthur Whitmore's name online. He had sold a medical supply company, donated to hospitals and clinics, and lost his wife 6 years earlier. He had 3 adult children. Every article described him as private. Every photograph made the age difference look worse. In one, he held a ceremonial check larger than my yearly salary. I imagined my daughter surrounded by lawyers and expensive furniture, pretending to love a man because she believed wealth could protect her from struggle. Then I hated myself for imagining it. I had raised Chloe to care for people, not to measure them by age or money. Yet I had already decided what kind of woman she had become before hearing her explanation. Still, when she finally walked through my front door, suspicion was stronger than guilt. She looked nothing like the young bride I had pictured. There were no diamonds, no designer handbag, no expensive coat. She carried the same worn backpack she had taken to Boston. Her face was thinner. Dark circles rested beneath her eyes. She looked as though she had spent weeks sleeping in chairs. I wanted to hug her. Instead, I asked, "Where is your husband?" "At a cardiology appointment." "You came alone?" He insisted. "Why?" "Because he knew I needed to talk to you without worrying about him." Her answer sounded thoughtful, which made me even more confused. Chloe sat at the kitchen table where she had once done her homework. I stayed standing, because sitting felt too much like accepting what she had done. "Why him?" I demanded. "Please, Chloe, just tell me why." She did not answer immediately. She opened her backpack and removed a clear plastic folder. From inside it, she took an old hospital receipt. The paper was faded and soft along the creases. I recognized the name of the hospital before I read anything else. St. Catherine Medical Center. 10 years earlier, I had collapsed in the stockroom at work with a ruptured aneurysm. I remembered waking after surgery and hearing that my insurance had denied part of the claim. I remembered a bill so large that I thought survival had become another thing I could not afford. Then a patient assistance program paid almost everything. The letter gave no donor name. It only said the grant had come from a private medical relief fund. For 10 years, I had kept that receipt in a box with Chloe's school certificates and my mother's wedding ring. I had not seen it since Chloe left for Boston. She pushed it toward me. A small line of print near the bottom read, "Emote timor petit and relief you," and my hands began to shake. "Where did you get this?" "From the box in your closet." I took a picture of it before I left for school because I wanted to apply for a scholarship through the same foundation. I looked at the name again, Whitmore. My eyes lifted slowly. Chloe nodded. The kitchen became completely silent. He paid my hospital bill. His foundation did. Did he know who I was? No. The program was anonymous. He only saw case numbers. I sat down. The anger inside me did not disappear. It collapsed under the weight of something larger. For 10 years, I had thanked a stranger in my prayers. Now that stranger was married to my daughter. He saved my life, I whispered.
Yes.
Is that why you married him? No. The answer came so firmly that I looked up. Chloe folded her hands on the table. Mom, Arthur is dying. She told me he had advanced heart failure. His doctors could manage his symptoms, but they could not repair the damage. He might have months, he might have less. I felt a wave of shame for the ugly assumptions I had made, but Chloe had not reached the worst part. Arthur's 3 children, Victoria, Grant, and Miles, had spent years waiting for control of his estate. They had expensive homes, failed businesses, and debts Arthur had quietly covered more than once. When his health declined, they began pressuring him to move into a facility outside the city. The brochure described peaceful gardens and attentive care. The inspection reports described medication errors, understaffing, and repeated complaints. Arthur refused. His children then claimed he was confused. They arranged meetings with lawyers without telling him. They tried to replace his longtime physician. They requested access to his accounts. One of them brought a realtor through his home while he was in the hospital. They were not planning for his care. Chloe said, they were planning around his death. I wanted to reject the story because it sounded too terrible. How did you become involved? Chloe looked down. My clinical group was assigned to the cardiac unit where he was treated. The words alarmed me. You married your patient. No. Listen to me carefully. I was never his primary nurse. I was a student on a supervised rotation. I checked his blood pressure twice and helped with discharge education. My rotation ended before we had any personal relationship. She explained that Arthur had left a leather notebook in his room after discharge. It contained phone numbers, medication notes, and a handwritten list of questions for his attorney. Chloe brought it to the hospital social worker. Arthur later sent a thank you note through the school because one page held information he desperately needed. Several weeks later, Chloe attended a public lecture at the Whitmore Foundation about access to medical care. Arthur was there in a wheelchair. After the lecture, she showed him the photograph of my old receipt. Arthur asked for the case number. When he saw it, he began to cry. He remembered the number because my surgery had been among the first emergency cases approved after his wife helped create the program. Arthur did not remember my name. He remembered only that the patient was a young single mother whose daughter had waited outside surgery holding a stuffed rabbit. That daughter had been Chloe. He asked me one question, Chloe said. He asked whether you lived. My throat tightened. What did you say? I told him you lived. I told him you raised me. I told him you sold your car so I could become a nurse. Chloe looked toward the window. He closed his eyes and said, then the money did what it was supposed to do. For the first time since she arrived, I reached across the table and touched her hand. But I still did not understand the marriage. Gratitude did not explain vows, Chloe continued. After they met at the lecture, Arthur invited her to visit his foundation office with a school mentor present. He showed her the patient relief program and asked about nursing school. Over the next 2 months, they occasionally spoke in public settings or with staff nearby. Then Arthur's condition worsened. His children filed a petition asking the court to appoint Grant as his temporary guardian. They claimed Arthur was making irrational decisions, giving away money and refusing necessary care. Arthur's own attorney, Elena Ruiz, believed the petition was designed to seize control before he could revise his estate and medical directives. Doctors still considered Arthur competent, but he was physically weak, easily exhausted, and vulnerable to being portrayed as confused during a long hearing. So you married him for legal standing, I said. That was part of it. Part. Chloe swallowed. He asked me to? I pulled my hand away. And you said yes. Not immediately. She said Arthur had first asked her to serve as his healthcare agent. She refused because she did not want to cross a line or make decisions his family should have been willing to make. Then she witnessed Victoria tell a discharge planner that Arthur had agreed to the facility. Arthur said he had not. Grant later brought papers for Arthur to sign while he was medicated. Chloe called the nurse before he could. Miles sent messages demanding the code to Arthur's home safe. Arthur's children spoke around him as though weakness had erased his voice. Chloe began visiting with his attorney's knowledge. The hospital ethics officer confirmed she was no longer involved in his clinical care. Arthur obtained 2 independent evaluations proving capacity. He signed a durable healthcare power of attorney, financial safeguards, and a written statement of his wishes. Then he asked Chloe to marry him. Why you? I asked. Because he trusted me. That is not enough reason to marry someone. No, she said softly. It isn't. She took a breath. I respected him. I cared about him. I knew how afraid he was of dying in a place he had never chosen. And by then, Mom, I loved him. I must have looked shocked. Not the kind of love you are imagining. She continued. Not a fantasy. Not a young woman pretending age does not matter. I loved his mind, his kindness, the way he remembered every nurse's name, the way he still wrote letters to patients he had never met, the way he feared becoming bitter more than he feared dying. I stood and walked to the sink because I could not organize my emotions while facing her. You should have told me. I wanted to. You barely spoke to me for months. Because Victoria hired an investigator. Grant threatened to report me to my school. Their lawyer warned Arthur that every message between be twisted into evidence of manipulation. I turned around. What? They called me a predator. They said I targeted him for money. They contacted my program director. I had to submit records proving I had not accepted gifts, tuition, rent, or anything else. Why did you not tell me? Because you were already working yourself sick, and because if they contacted you before I explained, I was afraid you would believe them. The sentence hurt because it was true. I had believed the worst after seeing one photograph. I walked back to the table and sat beside her. What happens now? The hearing is in 3 weeks. And Arthur, he wants to stay in his home. He wants palliative treatment. He does not want aggressive procedures that will only keep him in the hospital. What do his children want? Control. Chloe opened the rest of the folder. Inside were copies of medical evaluations, signed directives, and messages from Arthur's children. One message from Grant Ridd once the old man is declared incompetent. The house can be listed before the market drops. Another from Victoria Ridd, do not let him give more away. There may be nothing left for us. Miles had written, put him somewhere secure until the court date. Chloe cannot stop us if she cannot reach him. I read each message twice. The fear I had felt for my daughter changed direction. Take me to Boston. I said. Chloe looked surprised. Mom, I want to meet him. 3 days later, I stepped into Arthur Whitmore's home. It was not the mansion I expected. The house was large, but it felt lived in. Books covered the walls. Family photographs lined the hallway, though many had been turned face down. Soft jazz played from a speaker near the window. Arthur sat in a wheelchair beneath a gray blanket. He looked smaller than he had in the photograph. When he saw me, he tried to stand. Chloe stopped him gently. You do not need to get up, I said. He smiled. After waiting 10 years to meet you, I should at least make an effort. His voice was weak but clear. I knelt beside the chair. Mr. Whitmore, I do not know how to thank you. Arthur, he corrected. Arthur, your program saved my life. He studied my face with an expression I will never forget. You already thanked me. I never even knew your name. You raised her. He looked at Chloe. That is more thanks than any person deserves. I began to cry. So did he? For several minutes, none of us spoke. Then Arthur surprised me. I imagine you think I have lost my mind. I wiped my face. I thought many things before I came here. Some of them were probably reasonable. No, I said. Some of them were cruel. Arthur nodded, not offended. Fear often puts on the clothes of certainty. That sentence stayed with me. Over the next week, I watched them together. Chloe never spoke to Arthur like a child. She asked what he wanted and respected his answers. He teased her about her terrible coffee. She reminded him about his salt limit. At night, she organized his schedule while a licensed home nurse handled medication. Chloe kept careful boundaries because the court would examine every detail. Their marriage was built on trust, gratitude, companionship, and a promise that Arthur would not lose his voice because his body was failing. On my 4th day there, Victoria arrived without warning. She was in her early 40s, perfectly dressed, with a cream-colored coat and a leather folder. She looked at me as though someone had left mud on the carpet. So this is the mother, she said. Arthur's expression hardened. My name is Linda. I know your name. Victoria turned to Chloe. Our attorney offered you a settlement. Take it and leave. What settlement? I asked. Chloe remained calm. $200,000 if I agreed to an annulment, resign as healthcare agent, and sign a statement saying Arthur was confused. I stared at Victoria. You offered my daughter money to lie. We offered her an exit. Arthur's hand tightened around the arm of his wheelchair. Leave my house. Victoria ignored him. She opened the folder and placed a document on the table. Dad, sign this. It authorizes a short rehabilitation stay. Arthur did not touch it. Elena Ruiz, his attorney, entered from the study. She had been on a phone call and had heard enough. That document names Grant as temporary decision maker. Elena said, it is not a rehabilitation authorization. Victoria's face changed for half a second. Then she recovered. Dad needs protection. From whom? Arthur asked. The woman who brings me water or the children who bring me papers. Victoria looked at Chloe with open hatred. You will regret this. Chloe stood straighter. No. I regret that Arthur had to marry someone to make his own children hear the word no. Victoria left, but not before saying the hearing would destroy us. That night, Arthur became short of breath. The home nurse increased his oxygen and called the on-call doctor. Chloe sat near him, speaking quietly until his breathing eased. I stood in the hallway and realized how close death was. This was not a game. There was no romantic fantasy waiting beyond the courtroom. My daughter had tied her heart to a man whose time was running out because she believed dignity mattered, even when protecting it would break her heart. The next morning, Arthur asked me to join him in the study. Elena was there. On the desk sat several bank statements. Arthur explained that after his wife died, Grant began managing one small investment account. Over 3 years, money had been transferred to consulting companies Arthur did not recognize. He had questioned Grant, but Grant insisted the payments were legitimate. Elena's investigator discovered that 2 of the companies belonged to Grant's business partner. Another was connected to Victoria's husband. The total exceeded $400,000. Why have they not been charged? I asked. We needed proof that Arthur did not authorize the transfers, Elena said. The children claim they were gifts. Arthur looked exhausted. I gave them too much for too long. That made them believe everything was already theirs. Then Elena showed me something worse. A facility deposit had been paid from Arthur's account without his approval. The payment came with a contract authorizing medication management, restricted visitors, and transfer of decision-making if he became uncooperative. Arthur had never signed it. The signature looked close to his, but not close enough. I had worked in medical billing for 23 years. I had seen authorization forms, insurance appeals, and forged patient signatures. I leaned closer. This date is wrong, I said. Elena looked at me. What do you mean? The contract says Arthur signed at 11:15 in the morning on March 3rd. Yes. I pointed to a hospital record. He was receiving a cardiac procedure at 11:15. Look at the medication log. He was sedated. The room went still. Chloe pulled the records closer. I continued. And this witness signature belongs to a facility employee. If they claim Arthur signed in person, the hospital's security log can prove he never left. Elena immediately called her assistant. That small inconsistency changed the case. The hearing was no longer only about whether Chloe had influenced Arthur. Now the court would have to ask why Arthur's children were presenting a contract signed while he was sedated in another building. For the next 2 weeks, we prepared. Arthur recorded a statement in the presence of his lawyer and 2 physicians. He explained his marriage, his medical wishes, and his financial decisions. He revised his trust. Chloe refused to discuss the amount she might receive. Arthur solved that problem by telling me directly. Most of his estate would go to the Whitmore Patient Relief Fund. A protected education trust would be created for his grandchildren. Chloe would receive no cash inheritance. She would be allowed to live in the house for 1 year while the foundation converted part of it into a training center for patient advocates. That is all, I asked. Arthur smiled. She asked for less. What did she ask for? To keep my record collection and the blue mug she hates. From the hallway, Chloe called, I do not hate the mug. I hate that it cannot survive a dishwasher. Arthur laughed until he had to catch his breath. The laughter turned into coughing. That was our daily reality. Warmth followed by fear, a joke followed by oxygen, a plan followed by the knowledge that time did not care about fairness. On the rainy morning of the hearing, Arthur wore a navy suit, and Chloe wore a simple gray dress. I fastened the silver necklace she had worn in the wedding photograph. I am sorry, I told her. For what? For looking at that picture and deciding I knew your heart. Chloe met my eyes in the mirror. You were scared. I was judgmental. You came. I should have listened before I judged. She turned and hugged me. Then we went to court. Victoria, Grant, and Miles sat behind their attorney. They looked polished, sorrowful, and prepared. Their lawyer described Chloe as a financially desperate student who had targeted a wealthy, medically fragile widower. He mentioned my sold car. He mentioned Chloe's tuition. He mentioned the age difference again and again, as though repeating it could replace evidence. He argued that Arthur had married impulsively and that Chloe had isolated him from his family. Then Alina presented the visitor logs. For more than 8 months, Chloe had never prevented a single visit. Arthur's children had visited a combined total of 7 times. 3 visits occurred with lawyers present. 2 lasted less than 15 minutes. 1 happened only because Grant needed Arthur's signature. The courtroom became quieter. Elena presented the independent capacity evaluations. 2 doctors and a neuropsychologist had examined Arthur separately. All concluded that he understood his diagnosis, marriage, finances, and legal decisions. She presented the ethics review from Chloe's nursing program. It confirmed that Chloe's clinical assignment had ended before any personal relationship began, and that she had accepted no gifts or tuition assistance. She presented the amended trust. When the children learned Chloe would receive no cash inheritance, their expressions changed. Grant leaned toward his attorney. Victoria stared at Chloe as though the absence of money made her even more dangerous. Then Elena presented the facility contract. The children's lawyer objected. The judge allowed it. Elena walked through the timeline. At 11 o'clock on March 3rd, Arthur entered a cardiac procedure room. At 11:12, sedation was administered. At 11:15, the facility contract claimed he signed across town. At 11:48, the hospital record showed he remained under observation. Security footage confirmed he never left. The witness who claimed to see him sign was an employee of the facility. The deposit came from an account Grant could access. For the first time, Grant looked afraid. Elena then presented the financial transfers. The judge asked Grant whether Arthur had authorized them. Grant said yes. Arthur asked to speak. The judge allowed it. He moved slowly to the witness table. Chloe stood as though she wanted to help him, but Arthur shook his head. He wanted the court to see him move under his own power. His voice was faint at first. Then it strengthened. "My children say I am confused because I no longer agree with them," he said. "They say I am vulnerable because I am dying. I am vulnerable. I need help bathing. I need help walking. I sometimes need help breathing. But needing help is not the same as surrendering ownership of my life." No one moved. Arthur looked toward his children. "They discussed my house while I was still living in it. They discussed my accounts while I could still read them. They chose a facility before asking where I wanted to die." Victoria began crying. Arthur watched her with deep sadness. "I loved you before you knew the word inheritance," he said. "I do not know when my love became a number you were waiting to divide." Then he looked at the judge. "I married Chloe because she listened when I spoke. I signed legal directives because I knew my children would call my choices confusion. I am not confused. I am dying." Those are not the same thing. The words seemed to remain in the room even after he stopped speaking. Then Chloe testified. Her hands trembled, but her voice did not. She explained how she met Arthur, why she recognized the relief fund, and why she agreed to the marriage. The opposing attorney asked whether she loved him. "Yes," she said, romantically. "I love him honestly. That was not my question. It is my answer." The attorney asked whether she expected to benefit from Arthur's death. Chloe looked at him. "I expect to grieve." He asked why she did not simply remain his friend. "Because friendship did not stop his children from trying to erase his decisions." "Marriage gave you power." "No. Arthur's competence gave him power. The marriage and legal documents made it harder for other people to pretend he had none." Then she said the words that finally broke through every remaining doubt inside me. "I did not marry Arthur because he was wealthy. I married him because he was still alive, still lucid, and still entitled to decide what happened to his own body, home, and name." The judge dismissed the guardianship petition. She confirmed Arthur's right to remain at home and ordered an independent review of the disputed transfers and forged facility agreement. Grant was removed from every account. The facility contract was referred to investigators. The judge warned Arthur's children that any attempt to interfere with his care or contact his providers under false authority could result in sanctions. Outside the courtroom, Victoria approached Chloe. "For 1 second, I thought she might apologize. Instead, she whispered, 'You turned him against us.'" Chloe looked at Arthur, then back at her. "No. I stood beside him while you showed him who you had become." That was the justice they could not escape. The truth had taken away the story they planned to sell. They could no longer claim Chloe stole their inheritance because she was not receiving it. They could no longer claim Arthur lacked capacity because every independent expert disagreed. They could no longer hide the forged contract or missing money behind concern. Their own records exposed them. 2 months later, Grant agreed to repay a large portion of the transferred funds to avoid a civil trial. The facility fired the employee who claimed to witness Arthur's signature and entered into a settlement with the estate. The financial investigation continued after Arthur's death. Victoria and Miles tried to visit twice. Arthur allowed one meeting. He did not use it to punish them. He asked whether they could sit beside him for 1 hour without discussing money, property, doctors, or lawyers. They lasted 17 minutes. After they left, Arthur stared at the closed door. "I kept hoping they would become the children I remembered," he said. Chloe sat beside him. "Maybe they are hoping you will become the father who always rescued them." Arthur nodded. "Then perhaps this is the last rescue I can give them. I can let consequences arrive." Those words became his revenge. He stopped paying their debts. He stopped protecting their reputations. He stopped confusing love with rescue. And for the first time in years, they had to live with the results of their own choices. Arthur died 4 months after the hearing. He died at home, exactly as he wanted. Soft jazz played near the window. Rain tapped against the glass. Chloe sat on one side of his bed, and I sat on the other. His breathing had become slow and uneven. He opened his eyes and looked at me. "You were worth saving?" he whispered. I bent over his hand and cried. Then he looked at Chloe. "Do not let them make you hard." "I will not," she promised. His eyes moved between us. For one brief moment, he smiled. Then he was gone. After the funeral, Chloe and I sat in my rental car outside the cemetery. Neither of us spoke for a long time. Finally, I asked the question I had been afraid to ask. "Did you truly love him, Wes?" "What kind of love?" Chloe looked through the windshield at the gray sky. "The kind you feel for someone who proves goodness can be quiet. The kind you feel for a man who gave me back my mother before he knew either of us. The kind that makes you refuse to let a person die alone." I took her hand. "I was terribly wrong. You were afraid." "I was more than afraid. I judged you before you could speak." Chloe squeezed my fingers. But you learned?" Arthur's estate plan was carried out exactly as he intended. The Whitmore Patient Relief Fund received most of his wealth. His grandchildren received education trusts protected from their parents. The house became the Arthur and Evelyn Whitmore Center for Patient Dignity, named for Arthur and his late wife. It trained families, nurses, and advocates to recognize financial exploitation, forged consent, and the difference between incapacity and physical weakness. Chloe helped design the program after she graduated. She never became rich. She became something better. She became the kind of nurse who sat at eye level with frightened patients. She asked what they wanted before telling them what was available. She noticed when relatives answered questions that had been directed to the patient. On the wall of her office, she framed 2 items. One was our old hospital receipt. The other was a sentence Arthur had written in his final letter: "A person does not lose dignity when the body becomes weak. Dignity is lost only when others stop listening." Before I end, let me tell you what the story means to me. I believed my daughter had abandoned me, hidden a relationship, and married a wealthy older man for security. The truth was far more complicated. She had married a dying man who was fully capable of making his own choices. She helped protect his home, his medical wishes, his money, and his right to be treated as a human being. Arthur's children believed family meant ownership. Chloe proved that family can also mean standing beside someone when there is nothing left to gain. The lesson I learned is simple, but it cost me dearly. Fear can make us judge the people we love before we hear the truth. Age, illness, wealth, and appearances can tell part of a story, but they cannot tell us what is inside a person's heart. Real love is not always romantic in the way movies describe it. Sometimes it is loyalty. Sometimes it is gratitude. Sometimes it is sitting beside a dying man and defending his right to say no. And justice does not always arrive as punishment. Sometimes justice is a judge saying, "Your voice still matters." Sometimes it is money returned, forged papers exposed, and selfish people finally facing consequences without someone rescuing them. Sometimes revenge is simply refusing to let a lie become the final version of the truth. Thank you for listening to this story. Please like, comment, and share it with someone who believes people deserve dignity at every stage of life. And tell me in the comments where you are listening from, because every place this story reaches becomes one more reminder that quiet goodness can travel farther than we think. I once believed Arthur had taken my daughter away from me. The truth was that he had saved my life years before. Chloe protected his at the end, and together they taught me something I will never forget. The quietest love can make the loudest truth impossible to silence.